Good evening, everybody. My name is Brent Stevens. I'm the superintendent of Berkeley Unified School District. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for an hour-long town hall related to our middle school student assignment policy. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Francisco Martinez, who is the manager of our admissions office. Francisco, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Hi.
And behind the scenes, but not visible, is Jessica Lopez-Tello, who has been, as always, helping us with many of the logistics related to this town hall. So Jessica, thank you very much for being here tonight. What we hope to do tonight is provide an update on the middle school student assignment policy options that have been under consideration by the Board of Education in the community for about an 18-month period of time. Over the course of this time, we've engaged in multiple town halls, focus groups, and surveys to understand the desires of the Berkeley community on large issues related to diversity in our middle schools, to getting quite fine-grained and presenting options for a variety of different enrollment models. What we'll do today is provide you a view, really detailed view of updated versions of two contender models that will be decided upon potentially by the Board of Education on June 15th. We'll also have opportunities to respond to questions in the Q&A. And I imagine if there's time, we'll also have the opportunity to respond to folks who have live questions. So with that, we're going to jump in. We'll do a quick screen share and then begin with our presentation. Francisco, are you willing to share your screen if you've got that?
Yes. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So if you're joining us just recently, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. We're just about to launch into a presentation for our town hall. Just 1 second, we'll load up the slides and away we go. Excellent. So again, if you've just logged on, my name is Brent Stevens. I'm the superintendent here in Berkeley Unified, and I'm joined by Mr. Francisco Martinez, who is the manager of our admissions office. We're going to spend about an hour walking you through lots of details related to the middle school student assignment policy. Here we go. So we have been engaged in multiple phases of sort of deliberations about potential adjustment to our middle school student assignment policy. We began in the spring of 2021 with a round of community engagement meetings and surveys. In that initial stage, we were interested in sounding out the community on broader questions related to diversity in our middle schools. We proceeded phase one with a second phase in the fall of this current school year. And in that phase, we hosted multiple town hall events as well as focus groups for community members. We met with principals and teachers in order to sort of more refine our understanding of the community's thinking related to several different middle school assignment policy options. This last spring, right now, we're engaged in what we're calling phase three. We'd like to present through this town hall updated versions of these two policy contenders. And then we're anticipating on June 15th, as I mentioned, that this decision will go to the Board of Education, potentially to select a finalist model, and then a final decision made by the board in November of 2022. So this is the timeline, and it takes us over approximately an 18 to 20 month period of time. In tonight's webinar, we're proposing to do these things. First, we want to share updated information, listen to community thoughts, answer questions, and we'll do that in two specific ways. First, we ask you to use the Q&A function of this webinar that is enabled. We'll be monitoring your questions in the Q&A throughout our time together, so please look out for that button. It's on the lower right of your screen. We will also have opportunities to respond to live questions, and we'll do that if you use your virtual hand setting. And you can find that as well on the bottom panel of your webinar screen. Continuing on.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay.
And so just as a little bit of context, this is what we can imagine to be a continuation of a very long conversation here in Berkeley starting back in 1968 about the value of integrated schools. It's been a long-standing philosophical commitment of our community that our schools are diverse and integrated. And we see this as a continuation of a discussion that is now many decades in the making. Among the sort of features of diversity that we have held sort of as core in our community are that diversity enriches student educational experiences, enhances educational and occupational aspirations, enhances critical thinking skills, facilitates the equitable distribution of resources, reduces, prevents, or eliminates the effects of racial and social isolation, encourages positive relationships across racial and economic lines, and promotes participation in a pluralistic society.
Student diversity is it's not. Student diversity and integration are core values of Berkeley Unified School District. BUS right now, the BUSD middle schools are segregated. None of our middle schools reflect the social and racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity of BUSD. So the three middle schools are impacted by this segregation. If nothing is done, the current and the enrollment practices, we will continue to have not diverse and not integrated middle schools. I will go on briefly talk a little bit about some slides. I will go a little bit fast in some and then slow down in some of that are newer ones. So this reflects this slide, the racial makeup of our three middle schools. King in the middle, Longfellow and the King in the left, Longfellow in the middle, and Willer on the right-hand side. As you can see by this, our schools are not diverse racially. This is 3 years of data from our middle schools. Right now, King Middle School, half of the student population is white, whereas at Longfellow, it is only 19%, and 46% of the students at Willer are white. So there's discrepancies in our three middle schools. We also looked at what we call unduplicated students. These are students that include students who are on free and reduced lunch, students who are English learners, and students who are homeless or foster youth. As you can see on this graph, about 65% of the students that attend Longfellow are what we call unduplicated students. Whereas for the other two schools, it is much less. It's about like 28%. So having 65% of the students unduplicated affects Longfellow tremendously. We also looked at the students, what we call diversity categories. Diversity categories, I will show you a map a little bit later on, but it's roughly, we divide the city into three different, what we call diversity categories, just roughly. Diversity category 1 is in West Berkeley. Diversity category 2 is kind of the middle. And in the Berkeley Hills is diversity category 3. And we do it by colors. So in this case, you can see, for instance, at King Middle School, that 37% of the students that attend King in the past 3 years, so we aggregated the data for 3 years, 37% are from diversity category 1, that is the Flats or West Berkeley. And for Longfellow, it is 71% of the students that come from diversity category 1 or the Flats in Berkeley. And for Willer on the right-hand side is 42%. So, as you can see, is that our schools are not diverse and not integrated. So what are we doing about it? And what policies are we looking into to try to remedy some of these discrepancies and the segregation in our middle schools? So we're looking at three options. One option is not to do anything, just keep the current system and not change anything. Another option is to create an attendance zone for each of the middle schools. So there would be 3 attendance zones, just like we do for the elementary schools. Or a third option is to design an elementary to middle school feeder model of assignments. And in this case, a group of elementary students are, and a group of elementary schools are assigned into a given middle school to try to achieve diversity and integration at the schools. Just for context, this is a map, the current map of the 2 middle schools in the district. This map was created in 1994 during reconfiguration, in which King was given an attendance zone, and this orange area, that is the King attendance zone. And the green is for Willard. As you can see in here, they're pretty they're pretty large attendance zones, but Longfellow was not given an attendance zone in when it was created in 1995. It was designated as a magnet school or a school of choice, and the students needed to apply into that school. So this is the current option that we have right now. These white lines that are here, that is the elementary school attendance zone. So like in this area here is what we call the north zone, and the central zone is here, and then the southeast zone is here. In the central zone for the elementary schools, you see that both King and Willard have a portion of their student population comes from that area. Because we're going to be talking about this. So this is what we call the socioeconomic diversities and then diversity categories 1, 2, and 3. And we use the same colors of some of the bars that I used before. So this is roughly, this map was created using census data to reflect the socioeconomic factors in the district. So as you can see in here, part of, I was telling you that part of the Berkeley Hills is diversity category 3. About 30% of the students come from this diversity category 3, about 20% from the purple, which is diversity category 2, and about 50% of the students that attend our schools come from diversity category 1. And this map was created in 2004 when we modified the elementary student assignment plan, and so that's when it was created. So it's been litigated in the court, and it has been found to be constitutional and legally sound to assign students, as a process to assign students. So this is option 2. And one of the things that the district can do to make sure that the schools at the middle school are diverse and that they're integrated. This is a draft map of that we have done is, and in essence, is carved and an attendance zone for Longfellow in Berkeley. So the 3 middle schools are here. King is right here, Longfellow is here, and Willard is right here. So what we have done is used the diversity categories that we have for the elementary schools and that we have in Berkeley to carve and an attendance zone for the school. As you can see in here, people have said, why don't you just assign all of the kids from the central zone into Longfellow? Longfellow is a very small middle school. It can hold about 550 students. So we needed to make it a smaller attendance zone. Longfellow also is a school that serves right now the dual immersion students that attend Sylvia Mendez, and it would be our intention that those students would be fit into in the proposed model of a zone where they would fit into the school. So we needed to make it a little bit, that attendance zone a little bit smaller. So what we have done is the middle school zone, the current middle school zone is this line in here. So this is the middle school. So what we have done is a portion of the students would be coming from King and some from Longfellow, because those are the 2 middle school zones that we have. So like we needed to squeeze in something. So if you look at these numbers in here, we purposely let that attendance zone for Longfellow be a little bit smaller, because we need to fit in some of the kids that are attending Sylvia Mendez, but are currently attending, but currently coming from the North Zone or the King Zone or the Willard Zone. So we needed to leave some room in there. So this is the proposed map that we're looking at as a draft to make sure that the schools would be diverse and integrated. So I'm going to show you now what do the schools look like under a model of a 3-zone, and what kind of diversity would we have. So the students that we did the maps with are the students that are in the 4th grade, because those would be the students that may be affected if the board were to change the policy for 23-24. So currently, at the diversity category 1, which is in the flats or in West Berkeley, at King about 37% come from that diversity category, and 71% for Longfellow, and 42 for Willard. Using the map that I just presented you as having an attendance zone, we would see that the diversity at those schools would be in the dozen area, 44% is on the left-hand side, 44 for King, 41 for Longfellow, and 48 for Willard. The same thing applies for diversity category 2. So what this would allow, if we were to use this map, it would allow us to create diversity categories that at the schools that are reflective of of Berkeley and the attendance zone. So you can see in here for diversity category 2, they will range from 27 to 30, and diversity category 3, they would range from 25 to 30. So they would conform to what we currently have for the elementary schools, and their diversity. So it works well because our schools would be socioeconomically diverse. Moving on, so we have also what we call the feeder model schools. And in this case, we're going to present 3 different maps because we couldn't do it in one map only. So what we have done in here is we have grouped some of the schools, the elementary schools, and then to middle school. And this in this map, it is for King Middle School, where we have grouped Rosa Parks, Berkeley Arts Magnet, Ruth Acton, and Thousand Oaks, which are pretty much North Zone schools. And you can see that by how this where the students are going to be coming from. So each so this is a map of Berkeley. So King is right here, and Albany is right here. So what you can see is that most of the students on this model, the attendance zones, the current attendance zones are here. This blue line. So this is King in here and Willard here. So you can see under this map that most of the students that would be assigned to King come from their attendance zone. Few of them come from the Willard zone. And this is because Berkeley Arts Magnet is a central zone school, and because it's a central zone school, some students live in the King zone and some students live in the Willard zone. So that's what it reflects. So nothing much under this scenario for King, it looks pretty good, like since the congregation of students tend to be in the King zone. Then we moved in here. So for Longfellow, because Longfellow is the smaller middle school, we needed to be very aware of what schools we assign to them. And because of their the population that can be at the school. And so Sylvia Mendez was a given because of the students that are attending the two-way immersion. So we allocated Sylvia Mendez, and then we did Malcolm X. But then we needed another additional school because Sylvia Mendez and Malcolm X were not enough. So we needed to find one school that was small enough and that would be able to be accommodated at Longfellow. So Longfellow is right here. So Sylvia Mendez is a district-wide school, so some of the students are going to come from throughout Berkeley. But Malcolm X is a central and south zone school, and Oxford is a central school. So what we can see in this map, and we understand that having feeder model schools is beneficial for some families because all the familial and friend, all of the friendships that are developed and the social connections that are developed at the elementary schools can be followed at the middle schools. But one of the things that we find that in this scenario is that the kids would attend Longfellow are coming from throughout Berkeley, some as far as very close to Albany and in Kensington and in this area. So they're spread out throughout the district. So it would be, in some cases, very difficult for some of the families to get from all the way like close to Albany, all the way to South Berkeley into Longfellow here. So that's one of the problems that we encounter as we were mapping these schools. This is the last feeder school, and this is Willard. So we gave them John Muir and Emerson, which are two of the schools that are closest to them on the southeast part of Berkeley, and Willer is right here. So those schools normally right now they fit into the school, and the only two schools that were left is Craigman and Washington. Those schools are central zone schools for the elementary schools, and that is reflected in the in this map. As you can see, again, this line here tells us that where the north, the King zone is and the Willer zone. So King is on this side and Willer is on this side. So in the distant area, even though there would be social benefits of assigning students from elementary school to a middle school, then we would have transportation concerns that would need to be addressed, because students under this area would be coming from pretty much just like for Longfellow from throughout Berkeley. So it creates that concern. And lastly, one of the things that we did was to look at the feeder model of diversity and what would it look like using the feeder model for the three middle schools, for King, Longfellow, and Willer. Again, the current diversity at our schools is here, where Longfellow is 71% from diversity category 1 or West Berkeley, King 37%. This didn't change from the previous numbers. But when we looked at the diversity, because our elementary schools are diverse, then we also get diversity for diversity category 1 of 46 to 41 in this area, so that the three schools would be diverse. And so that is reflected, and this is diversity category 3. So like either model would achieve some sense of diversity at the middle schools, whether we were to do a three-zone model or the feeder school model that we have in the district. But one of the big concerns that we have for the feeder model is the transportation concerns that come about with this model. I think you're next.
Yes, thank you so much, Francisco. I appreciate very much that you walked us through those things. You know, I'm going to propose that we take a little break. I do see that there are a few questions entered now into the Q&A, and I think that they pertain to the material that we just covered.
Okay.
So why don't I'm going to just pop that open. I'll read aloud a couple of these questions. We'll answer those questions. We'll also see if there are any participants who would like to ask a live question, and then we'll go through the second section. First question is this. I'll just read it aloud. My understanding from meetings a year or two back was that the disparity between the schools was primarily due to the policy of placing all inter-district transfer students at Longfellow, but that this policy was changed starting in the 21-22 school year. Is that accurate? And if so, was there any resulting change in this year's 6th grade cohort? Francisco, I think you're the expert in this area. Do you want to try a response to this one?
We do assign middle school students to Longfellow who are on inter-district permits, but they're not the cause of this. We assigned inter-district permit students to the three middle schools. I looked at the numbers earlier in the year because that kept coming up and coming up. When I looked at the numbers, we did assign about 30 students to on inter-district permits to Longfellow, but we also assigned about 15 to 20 to both King and Willer, to both of them. So that they're not the number. One of the things that we have found over time is that the number of Berkeley families requesting King and Willer has increased, whereas the number of families requesting Longfellow has decreased. And because of that, then we have an attendance zone model for the middle schools, where the kids that live in the King zone go to King, and the ones that go to Willer go to Willer. Then it leaves us with very little options as to like how to integrate Longfellow when most of the families who want to go to King and Willer, and that leaves us with few options. And the original intent of the magnet school fund back in 1990, was it like in 1999 when they got it, was for there to be, the concept was that there was going to be enough of a magnet at Longfellow that would draw students from both King and Wheeler, and that way the schools were going to be integrated. But that over time, that didn't happen, and that's the reason. Is like families are not requesting Longfellow, Berkeley families.
Great. Thank you very much, Francisco, for that response. There's just a comment here that the maps are old without a lot of detail. Can we provide more detailed and updated maps? We hope we've done that. There was an older map presented earlier in the presentation. The later maps, though, the ones that we covered a bit later in the presentation, are all new and updated. They represent the sort of second version of each of the maps that we've created to represent the different policy options. So we hope that we've been responsive to that in providing the newer and updated maps, but we did provide that one older map just to represent the diversity categories themselves. There is a question about what diversity category means. Francisco, I wonder if would you be willing to just review again what we mean when we say diversity category?
So I'm going to use the map so we can look at this again. So when we created this map in 2004, I actually called it composite diversity. And why we call it composite diversity is because it's not one thing that goes into the creation of these diversity categories. So what we're looking in here is that we have three variables that go into the creation of an attendant of the diversity categories. So we divided Berkeley into what we call planning areas. So each of these little squares is 445 squares, and we call them a planning area. They range from 3 to 6 city blocks. Then we didn't use census tracts, or we didn't use like city blocks because some were too small, a city block, and the census tract was too big. So we wanted something that was a little bit smaller than that. So we created this. So we gathered data from the census. So like into the creation of this, it goes parent education and parent income. That comes from this, what is reported to the census. So we get the data from the census, and then we plot it in each of the planning areas, whatever was reported, to create an average of that. In addition to that, we got historical racial makeup of the students in Berkeley at the elementary school level, and we plotted that on that. So each of the planning areas has parent income, parent education, and student diversity, in this case, ethnicity at the schools. And we create, so we did a simple sum of those, and we created what we call the diversity category in each of the planning areas. So we gave him a number of that given, and then there was a weight given to each number. And this map was created using that. So each of the diversity categories in this case has, and then we created what we call a geographical area. So this is diversity category 3, given that, so like normally they have higher income, higher education, and for the most part tend to be students that are not of color, in this case, white students. Whereas in this area here, this is where we have the least in Berkeley, least parent education and parent income, and this is where we find more students of color. Of course, we understand that that the demographics in Berkeley have changed, and whenever data is released from the census, we update this diversity category map to reflect that as soon as the data is released from the census. So this is what a diversity category is in Berkeley.
Great. Thank you for that, Francisco. And Francisco, another question just about Sylvia Mendez specifically. Can you remind us, in each of these models, where would students who attend Sylvia Mendez go to middle school?
So the students under this model, Sylvia Mendez would always fit in regardless if there were to be a change. Our proposal is that the students that are that attend Sylvia Mendez would go into Longfellow. Whether is an attendance zone in this scenario, we would fit into that because that's where the program is. And in order to get the full benefit of the dual immersion program, is that we want to have discussed that we want those students to continue on as a K-8 model and attend Longfellow for middle school to get all the benefits of the dual immersion program. So under this scenario, they would go to Longfellow, and also under the scenario of a feeder school, we have also assigned Sylvia Mendez to Longfellow in this case.
Great. Thank you, Francisco. And Francisco, a couple more questions about these maps. We're getting a few people type into the Q&A that they wonder where their own child would go to school on this map. And so just one question, are these the final maps or are these just drafts right now?
I have had worked on this, like, and I'm just going to use this map because this is the one that reflects more of the work. The other ones are just like feeder. So for this, we had worked over this over many years. When the superintendent Stevens came on board, we are in 2019, we already had like 1 year of work of looking at this. So they has gone through many iterations. Like so they are on draft form right now. Of course, this kind of represents some of the best thinking that in the district as to where the lines should be. We try to make the lines for Longfellow in this case. We were cognizant of the fact of the number, the capacity of Longfellow, and where to move the lines in order to make sure that the three schools, because we were looking not just at Longfellow, we were looking at the 3 middle schools, so that the schools would be diverse and integrated. And we understand that the families will be affected. So I don't have the specific addresses because this is not final whether it's like a given student would be affected. But what I can tell you is, like, if your kid lives right now like around Willer University, which in Martin Luther King, I would say that is in the green area. But we don't have like the exact addresses. We do have addresses in here that can pretty much tell you, but we don't have that great level of detail. I think that would be forthcoming if the board were to select one over the other options in June.
Great, thank you, Francisco. So more detailed maps are not available yet, but of course, prior to the sort of enactment of this policy, we would have more detailed sort of address-based maps. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Francisco. There's a couple questions coming through about the proposed construction project at Longfellow. Several families have asked about sort of the timing of that project and how it would interact with a potential policy change. We do know right now it's sort of that our proposed timeline for construction would begin in May of 23. These are highly dependent on approval by the Division of State Architects in Sacramento. But assuming that the sort of preliminary sort of schematic design goes as planned and approvals are granted, we would begin construction in May of 23. And we anticipate being able to wrap up the project in about 18 to 19 months. We would expect to have the project completed by November of 24. So that's the sort of impacted timeline as we contemplate the Longfellow construction project. There's a question here about transportation, and I'm going to use this as a segue to start talking a little bit about transportation and program. So the question is just sort of wondering why we've mentioned that transportation is only a concern in the feeder model, and wouldn't it also be a concern in the 3-zone model as well? And so why don't we sort of pick up there and talk a little bit about program and transportation. And describe to you some of the additional conversations taking place about these two topics. Way back in phase 2 of this process, we did lots of querying of the community to understand what additional concerns might rise from families if the district were to select a different enrollment policy for middle schools. We heard 2 themes predominantly in all of the feedback. One of them had to do with expanding programming, and particularly affinity-based programming in all of our middle schools. The other concern had to do with transportation. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit in very broad terms about what it might look like to expand affinity-based programming in our schools, and then to talk about sort of the costs associated with transportation. So looking at this first slide, we just see the two programs right now in Longfellow Middle School that are particularly targeted to students who are either African American or Latinx. These programs are not exclusive to those two categories of schools, but they are nonetheless sort of focused on them. In order to expand the current Umoja class, which exists at Longfellow, over to King and over to Willard, we would anticipate that the district would spend about $100,000 per year, or about half of a teacher at each of the two middle schools. So that is sort of a cost potentially associated with this policy change if it is the board's desire to attach expanded affinity-based programming to this policy decision. We're looking as well at costs associated with the Puente program. Puente is a brand new program here to Berkeley and is just beginning at Longfellow and at Berkeley High School next year. If we were to aim to expand that programming to all of our middle schools, we'd be talking about a carrying cost of about $80,000 per year. In total, this represents about $180,000 per year in new costs to the district to expand those two programs. If we continue forward, we'll have a look at transportation. And Francisco, do you mind advancing the slide, please? Thank you. Take it back one. There we go. So we do know right now, having analyzed our own sort of driver and bus capacity, that we would be able to add one middle school route to our current bus driver routes without any new cost to the district. We think we could accommodate just one of those buses. If we expand transportation at the middle school level beyond that one bus, then here's a very simple representation of the breakdown of those costs. To purchase an electric bus, we're talking about approximately $500,000, and to hire one driver for a year is a cost of about $100,000, benefits included. So for each bus we add in, for each route that we build into the middle school, we're talking about a sustained cost, or sorry, one-time cost to the district of $100,000, or sorry, a one-time cost of $500,000 and a sustaining cost of about $100,000 per bus. We'll continue on. So we want to engage a little bit on those two topics, but we thought we'd sort of land with the end of this presentation with the superintendent's recommendation. And I wanted to make more explicit sort of where we are, staff, where I am as the superintendent, in terms of a recommendation to the board on June 15th. At this point, we plan to bring to the board for discussion at that date recommendation that the school board adopt the 3-zone model. We'll go back and show you that map one more time to look at it in more detail. In this 3-zone model, the sort of rationale here is that it's got a sort of face value familiarity for our families and the district. We use it already to good effect to integrate our middle school, our elementary schools. It does provide King, Longfellow, and Willard to be diverse and integrated. On average, the commute times for families are shorter in this model. And if some level of transportation is to be provided, the 3-zone model might be a clearer set of bus routes. Now, full transparency, we haven't plotted out bus routes yet for either of these two policy options. If one of these is ultimately selected by the board, then we've built ourselves a year in order to sort of plan for any additional transportation and to coordinate with AC Transit to be able to provide public bus access in keeping with the new enrollment pattern. Francisco, if you don't mind just sort of taking us back, why don't I sort of finish with the survey and then we can sort of jump back and look at these maps. Apologies. Okay. So we've got a QR code here that folks right now can use to be able to respond to a survey that asks for a variety of sort of responses to questions related to zone preference, whether or not you prefer any of these policy options. It also asks a set of questions about program and transportation options. And we hope that you'll take some time to respond to this survey. Francisco right now is sort of just showing us his screen. But what we'll be doing is asking folks to give us some information about your family and then respond to a set of questions that appear in a couple different sections. By tomorrow, we will have sent this survey out to the full Berkeley community. We hope to solicit responses from all of our families so that we've got a rich set of information that we can offer the school board as we begin our deliberations about these potential policy changes. Francisco, thank you very much for throwing that in there. I think you hopefully have got a view-only link in there.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So why don't we hop back to our presentation? And we'll have a look at the Q&A again, sort of head there. And one more time, just invite anybody who would like to ask a live question to raise their hand. I see that we have one person who'd like to ask a live question. Why don't we do that first? And then we'll just sort of move back and forth between live and written questions. So just looking, let me see, looking over at our participant list, we've got questions first from Rebecca Portnoy, and then next from Alex Garcia. So Ms. Portnoy, we're going to promote you so that you're able to ask a question. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Oscar Luna. And,
he's on my computer.
we are,
got you.
We are both parents of two students in the Berkeley School District. And my son is in 4th grade. And I have a number of questions, but I will summarize in just a couple.
Thank you.
Yeah, so number one is your plan for transportation wasn't very convincing. That, you know, it hasn't been thought through what is going to happen on the transportation. It seems like you are first going to make a decision and then think about the transportation. And for parents who work, in my case and my wife, we both work, and bringing kids to school and picking them up will cause a significant disruption for us. We live very close to King Middle School, and you know, we just can walk there, and so that will represent a significant problem for working parents. And that's my case. I'm a working parent, but also I think the demographic understanding of the Berkeley Hills might be misunderstood, because you know, there are a lot of working parents here in the Hills, and this transportation challenge, crossing the entire town every day, twice a day, will constitute a significant problem for us. And I want to make it clear that, you know, for us, we were planning to go to King Middle School, just, you know, a few blocks away from our house. The other question that I have that I think
Mr.
is
Garcia, let's please ask that question, and then I'll ask you to wrap it up so that we can jump to some other speakers.
Who is Mr. Garcia?
Oh, I apologize. Did I get your name wrong?
Yes, you did.
I apologize.
My name is Oscar Luna.
I apologize to you. Sorry, Mr. Luna. If I'll ask your question, and then we'll be happy to respond, and then we'll jump to another speaker.
Okay, so the second question that I think it has not been addressed yet is what is the impact of additional kids arriving to a construction zone? You just acknowledge that there is a construction project, but you know, you haven't talked about what it would be the impact of increasing the student numbers into a construction zone. You know, I'm very concerned about that. So I would love to hear more about it.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Luna. I apologize again that I messed up on your name. We do register your comment about transportation. We thank you for that. You're right that we have not plotted out specific routes. You can see that this is very much tied to a budget decision, in that there are both one-time and sustaining costs for the district if we add transportation routes into this policy decision. In terms of the construction, we have been planning all along to not increase the capacity of Longfellow as part of these maps. We do know that we'll be able to accommodate Longfellow's full capacity through the construction phase. That means that we don't need to drop capacity at that school or reassign students during the construction period. It's very common in school construction projects that we would phase the construction program over the course of those months, such that learning can continue and students can continue to attend the school. This will be the case in other school construction projects as well, such as Sylvia Mendez coming up in the next couple of years. Why don't we jump over to the Q&A again? We'll take a couple questions there and then go over to a live question. There's a question here. It says, won't children be coming to Longfellow from the whole district simply because of the immersion program being there? And Francisco, do you want to sort of try that one? Sort of what impact does the immersion program being at Longfellow have on the overall sort of spread of students, geographic spread of students attending that school?
So yes, for Sylvia Mendes is a district-wide elementary school, and it was designed many years ago, but it was also the intent for those students to continue on into Longfellow to get the full benefits of the dual immersion program. And so yes, the students. If I look just really quickly at this, some of the students that and I'm assuming that in this area here that you see like these ones in this yellow area, that some of them may be students that are at Sylvia Mendes, just from those numbers there and where they are, because students that attend Sylvia Mendes, they come from throughout the district. And but what we want to conceive is that maybe the dual immersion program is a KA program. We again is so that the students get the benefit of the two-way immersion program. Not just elementary, but as a middle school. That's okay.
Great, thank you. Why don't we jump back over to a live question, and we have next Alex Garcia.
Yeah. So my question is that you've discussed diversity quite a bit as a goal for this new policy, but I'm wondering what if that's at odds with equity? Because I know, for example, at Sylvia Mendes, based on the data that they just showed from the update to the Latinx resolution, students are doing really well there. And I think there's a very high concentration, if I'm not mistaken, of Latino students there. You know, I think having that high concentration and the cultural affirmation that comes along with that, are we going to dilute that? Are we going to break what's working by forcing the diversity in each school rather than allowing something like Sylvia Mendes, what's going on there, to happen in the middle schools?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Garcia. Appreciate that question. This has actually been sort of an interesting theme throughout our engagement with the community. This very question comes up over and over again. So to answer just sort of one part of it, there of course is no impact to Sylvia Mendes as part of these discussions. And then we have been in the context of these discussions about our 3 middle schools, been hearing sort of a similar argument against this particular policy change. One sort of critical part of what we've been looking at is the sort of ongoing trend towards the increase of students who fall into that unduplicated category at Longfellow School. We do have that sort of trend line that we can represent to you, and here we see it again. What we see over the course of this time is that unduplicated students, the sort of percentage of unduplicated students at Longfellow continues to climb while it's been declining over time. And this sort of represents for Longfellow School a set of systemic barriers that the staff there, who are every bit as qualified as our other schools, as well as all the programming, are frankly struggling to overcome. Longfellow is a wonderful school, and there's a lot of assets there, but these are really sort of policy questions about how the district uses the natural advantage of diversity to make sure that all of its schools are strong and as well sort of enjoy similar learning conditions. So this sort of argument about diversity versus concentration is one that we've been hearing. We certainly acknowledge it, and yet this data and its attendant challenges is what's really driving this policy discussion. Let's continue on just sort of looking at some of these questions. We've got a number of them here and really appreciate it. Somebody has just asked, what does unduplicated mean? Thanks for asking this question. Unduplicated is a term used by the state of California. There's 3 groups of students who fall into this category. They are students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, students who are English language learners, and students who are considered to be foster youth. Those are the three categories associated with being quote unquote unduplicated. There's another question, and Francisco, maybe you could help us with this one. This is about siblings in either of these plans. This question is specific to the 3-zone plan. The question reads, under the 3-zone plan, for students who have older siblings at one of the zoned schools, will they be assigned to their older sibling school or follow the new plan?
It would be my recommendation that if they are siblings attending the same grade span, whether it's like elementary or middle school, that we honor the sibling priority in the district. I don't think it's the intention to have one kid in the 8th grade go to one middle school and in the 6th grade go to a different school. It would be my recommendation that we honor the sibling priority that we have in the district.
And yes, and that's also my thinking as well. A slight difference to this, though, is that there wouldn't necessarily be sort of a legacy, sort of if an older sibling had come and gone through a middle school and the policy were altered, there would not be sort of a legacy assignment given to the younger sibling, so that the sibling preference would only apply to a sibling who actually attends that school, not one who had attended and left. Let's see. I'm just looking at questions right now. This is a question and a bit of a comment. I'd like to read it out loud. How is it that affinity-based programming only matters if we diversify the schools? Longfellow is currently not a school of choice in that only 30 to 50 children choose it at the 6th grade, I think is what the writer means. How is it that all of those children that were assigned Longfellow did not deserve transportation? Is this just a poison pill? So these are all, I think, fair questions. I think any of these sort of program and transportation questions can be considered outside of any policy discussion. And in fact, it may well be that as part of budgeting conversations that we sort of take up the challenge of expanding affinity-based programs to our other middle schools. And of course, it's always sort of a budget decision that the district can elect to provide additional transportation. So the two are connected in that we got lots of feedback from our last phase about the value of considering these things together. But it's not our view, not my view, that the policy needs to be considered in combination with these program changes. They're here because of the feedback, but they're not necessarily, they don't have to be connected in terms of a single decision. Let's see, another question, if a family lives on the border of 2 school areas, would the family have the option to decide? This is probably a question you might be able to answer, Francisco, in that we face similar sort of challenges now with our elementary assignments.
One of the things that I'm assuming they're referring to this, we try to give families as much as we can and to keep the families diverse and integrated. I envision that there would be a waiting list for the schools and where we can serve families at a given middle school after we have served the students that live in a given attendance zone, that we would honor waiting list for the other schools. Unfortunately, just families living on the border, I think that we first need to do it, respect the boundaries, and then try to see how many families can be accommodated given the policy and the diversity and the capacity of the schools.
Thank you. I'm going to read aloud a comment here. I think this is more a comment than a question. As a parent whose child will likely fall into the new zone for Longfellow, I'd like to hear more about the plan for construction. Another construction question. I believe very much in the need for schools to be balanced, but my child is one who travels very far across town to her elementary school and has worked hard to create community there outside of her neighborhood. Based on the new map, she'd be attending a middle school where almost none of her friends attend, and potentially will then have to live under construction. So I'm registering the comment about concern about being separated from a friend group. And then in terms of the construction timeline, I shared earlier that we're imagining Longfellow construction to take place between May of 2023 and November of 2024. That's about an 18-month period that's contingent on approval from the state. During that time, we're not anticipating that there would be a decline in the school's capacity. The same number of students can attend, and using a phased approach to construction, which is common in school construction and which we use in other school construction projects. Students will have access to all of their programs and continue to be able to attend Longfellow School. I'm just glancing through these questions. There's a question that reads this way: how will the district manage the differences and inequities in the physical campuses, sports and programs, particularly in the case of Longfellow, which has a much smaller campus and fewer programs? So this particular policy discussion is really about who attends the schools. We've also added in sort of two additional elements, just the affinity-based programs, Umoja and Puente, as well as transportation concerns. What we haven't attempted to do as part of this policy discussion is talk about the full set of differences between our schools. We do know that the campuses are different sizes. That's true about all three schools. We know that programming can be different, particularly elective programming, and that's really driven by teacher interest far more than it is district decisions about what is offered. So we've sort of put some sort of parameters on this policy discussion, and we're limiting it simply both to the assignment policy as well as these sort of more restricted questions about affinity-based programs and about transportation options. So I see that we're reaching the 6:30 hour. I want to offer my thanks to everyone who's attended the town hall this evening. We are going to put a live recording of this town hall on our website. On our website as well, you'll be able to find this, this slide deck with all of the updated maps. You'll also find a link to the survey, which we included in tonight's chat, as well as in a QR code. And tomorrow we'll be sending a letter out to the larger BUSD community asking for feedback, again, using the same survey instrument so that we can collect in the viewpoints of various constituents here in the district. My thanks to Francisco Martinez for all of his work to prep for this presentation and for joining me tonight. Francisco, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then as well to Jessica Lopez-Tello for her work behind the scenes to help us get set for this evening's town hall. So thanks to everybody. We really appreciate the hour that you spent. Please reach out if you've got questions. We'd be happy to continue to help and look out for information that we'll send out very shortly. Thank you, everybody, and good night to all of you.